It actually took me a long time to write this and put this together and actually come to grips with the reality that Toriyama-san is gone. He was a huge part of my youth personally and my journey. I wanted to give Toriyama-san his just due and not have this moment be a passing blip on the channel. So here we are, and no matter the outcome, I feel good that we get to spend this episode honoring Toriyama-san, despite it not really having to do with anything with fashion per se. But I'll definitely shoehorn it in, because that's just what we do. In any case, let's get to the real intro. Akira Toriyama is very likely the most well-known mangaka in the world. The creator of Dragon Ball and its spin-off Dragon Ball Z is not only a legend in manga, but animation, gaming, and of course, illustration. But sadly, he has passed and is very likely crossing that snake road himself. And while we don't cover anime or manga on this channel, we surely, and I should say I personally, have been inspired by him in more direct ways than I can count. But beyond the personal, Toriyama-san, by extension of his work, changed the image of Japan and would spur on an interest in manga, anime, and the culture of Japan in general in the late 90s and early 2000s. And today, we're gonna highlight those in a major way, outlining piece by piece just how important Toriyama-san's life and work was to global pop culture, as with a stroke of his pencil was able to inspire an entire generation. I'm Reggie Casual, let's get it. First up, the ones after. As one might expect, in Japan, Toriyama-san is considered a legend, an individual that informed and inspired a generation of mangaka and established what it meant to be a shonen manga for a new age of readers. While the original Dragon Ball set a tone that focused a lot on antics as well as martial arts, Dragon Ball Z turned up the ante on the martial arts and established a new level of shonen action manga and animation that continues to prevail to this day. From Bleach, Naruto, My Hero Academia, One Punch Man, Kimetsu no Yaiba, and of course, One Piece. You can see hints of what Toriyama established all the way back in the late 80s. When the Dragon Ball Z animation finally got syndicated in the US and in the West in its entirety, it set yet another standard. In the US, shows like G.I. Joe 1983, He-Man 1983, Thundercats, which happened to be animated by a Japanese studio in 1985, and Batman the Animated Series 1992 were heralded as some of the best action animations of the time. By that time, however, in 1986, the original Dragon Ball was tearing through Japan, and its second installment, Dragon Ball Z, releasing in 1989, surpassed it even further. But the fact that many people in the West can recognize that as well is what makes Toriyama-san such an important figure. Via Dragon Ball and Z, Toriyama-san captured the imagination with its in-depth story, character development, funny moments, and of course, weighty combat that had up until that point had never been done in animation at that level. Yes, tricks were used to make it more intense, but as a Westerner, watching the Dragon Ball Z animation, it was like you were watching a televised animated movie. There truly was nothing like it, and it had all the things you wished you could do. Flying, ki blast, martial arts, hyperspeed, ungodly strength, and cool personalized techniques. And as a result of its popularity, Western animations had to kick it up another notch, leading to an awesome new era which included Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, Justice League, or basically the entire DC animated lineup, and of course, Avatar. But Toriyama-san via Dragon Ball also opened the door to another phenomenon that went unnoticed by a few, but was incredibly important: import-export from Japan. So, how did Dragon Ball actually become so popular in the West? It's a well-known fact that Western entrepreneurs would go to Japan and get some influence, or downright buy the rights to properties in Japan. That's how we got Transformers, Gundam, Speed Racer, and even Power Rangers. But OG Dragon Ball got off to a rough start. First airing in the West in 1989, it made very few waves, as it was cut and billed as sort of a movie, which was strange. By 1996, however, Haim Saban, yes, that's Saban, bought the US rights to Dragon Ball Z, and it aired super early on UPN in the United States. However, the show was still cut into an American-style seasonal structure, and we had to wait for, now, Funimation, the company that he created, to make the dubs. We waited and then it got on Cartoon Network's Toonami, but still we had to wait for dubs. The fervor for the series reached such a fever pitch that some opportunistic fans said F it and scoured for ways to get the series in its entirety from Japan, as by that time Dragon Ball Z was already a completed story. It was a hard road, but it was found out that one subculture would almost certainly have a way to do it if you didn't have a plug directly from Japan. Enter the comic community. And yep, they almost always had it. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but the comic community at the time were a bit like the anime community today. Incredibly gatekeepy, largely standoffish or judgmental, and would more likely kick you out of their store than actually help you out. I'm just joking, anime community. I know you're good people. I was just joking. Anyway, back to Toriyama-san and this import-export thing. The comic book dudes had the goods. They had DBZ, and the persistence and growing demand opened up a new revenue stream for them that trumped the gatekeep, importing animation from Japan. This industry exploded and even started the career of subbers and translators. And due to this explosion of interest, other animations began popping up, from Japan of course, and eventually the writing was on the wall. I mean, why should these independent stores get all the money from these endeavors? Big business stepped in and began filtering more and more Japanese animations and manga, which has led to its cementing in Western society. And make no mistake, Toriyama was a huge part of that. But beyond the interest for Dragon Ball, as people became familiar with Toriyama's work, they began to see and understand his art style. And while manga totally existed before Toriyama's reign, his style became nearly synonymous with Japanese comic art. His simple yet powerful, bold, and deceptively detailed style seemed approachable, less complicated than Western comic book art, which seemed like it would take years to master, but good enough to be respectable and highly flexible. Even Toriyama-san himself liked to keep things simple and said, basically with everything, I choose my criteria based on what can be easy. If I made the real world the setting, I'd have to draw looking at reference materials for stuff like buildings and vehicles. And when you do that, people complain even if it's just a little bit off. Toriyama-san probably didn't know at the time of starting his journey that his style would begin the illustration process and training for thousands of not only Japanese fans, but Western fans as well. The amount of individuals recreating Dragon Ball Z characters, for example, has had such a profound impact on pop culture that an entire generation of illustrators owe their own humble beginnings to studying the art of Toriyama Akira. But fans of Toriyama-san know that Dragon Ball is perhaps his magnum opus, and while work on other series like Dr. Slump is commendable, in digital media, his abilities are just as legendary, particularly in the gaming space. While Dragon Ball has seen thousands of adaptations in and of itself, other titles like Chrono Trigger, Blue Dragon, and of course Dragon Quest are also more than worth noting. Chrono Trigger, for example, is widely considered one of the best JRPGs of all time. In fact, according to the highly acclaimed gaming magazine Famitsu and its readers, Chrono Trigger is considered the best game, period, of the entire Heisei era. That's an entire era, the best. It's certainly in my top 3, and I can't even think of the other 2 right now, which is saying something. Now, as far as Chrono Trigger is concerned, due to Toriyama-san's artwork, it created a crossover appeal that was instantly recognized by Dragon Ball fans. And it wouldn't take long for other games by Square, now Square Enix, to gain attention even without the help of Toriyama, setting the stage for a run by the developer that is considered one of the greatest eras in gaming history, especially when it comes to role-playing games. And while Chrono Trigger was great as far as impact, Dragon Quest is probably Toriyama-san's greatest achievement. As a co-creator of the original game, Toriyama-san would lend his artistic talent to a series that would become one of the greatest in Japanese gaming history. The game series has sold well over 88 million units, has grossed over $5 billion USD, is Japan's biggest RPG franchise, Square Enix's second biggest RPG franchise after Final Fantasy, and till this day uses the art style established by one Toriyama Akira. It became so popular that an urban myth sprouted up that laws were made in Japan to ensure the series wouldn't release on week/work days, lest kids skip school or adults call in sick to purchase the game. While the myth has since been debunked, it is rooted in some truth. The actual reason Dragon Quest is released on non-work days is because of an agreement between, at the time, Nintendo and Square, so as to prevent people from skipping work and school to purchase the game, which makes more sense due to Nintendo's family image. All that said, Dragon Quest's global reach and recognition has turned it into a staple in gaming and cemented the legendary status of Toriyama-san in another field outside of manga and animation. So we've outlined a few things, but what about fashion? Because you know, I told you we were gonna try to shoehorn that in somewhere. But thing is, it ain't hard with Toriyama-san, which is wild. And fashion, particularly when it comes to the Dragon Ball brand, there have been countless collaborations. Notables include Dickies, Extra Large, Granif, Adidas, Lee Jeans, and of course, a bathing ape in lukewarm water. But beyond the collabs, Toriyama-san was no slouch when it came to designing styles for his characters. And while Trunks, of DBZ fame, are often considered the best designed character, Vegeta's pink Badman shirt is iconic. Piccolo and Postboy is slick and timeless, and even Krillin dropped a few fresh fits in Zed. But in no uncertain terms, Bulma is quite possibly the most well-fitted Dragon Ball character ever. It's not even an argument. Whenever she went casual, it was a new look and never really disappointed. And while her future son Trunks was given the tools, Vegeta's casual fits were no slouch either. Other characters like Ascot sporting Android 17 also gets major love by the community, and in fact, the characters from Z eventually crossed over with Street when artists, independent artists that is, began outfitting these characters in modern styles. It seemed a natural fit and further showcased the crossover appeal of Dragon Ball and its influence. But perhaps Toriyama-san's biggest contribution is to something even he probably didn't consider: a worldwide growing interest in Japan itself. While Japan certainly had its fans before Toriyama-san's work, after Dragon Ball and the games, it exploded. Even the Japanese Tourism Board had to find ways to make Japan less about Japanese manga and anime and more about its history and beauty. But that interest turned to respect, and that respect turned into an adoration for Japanese culture and its people. The cascading effect being that of more Westerners learning Japanese than ever before in the history of mankind, despite Japanese not really being useful outside of Japan. Even Japanese people are surprised to meet Westerners who learn it and speak it and always seem to ask,
but why though?
To add to that, more people around the world would make Japan their home, leading to an explosion of immigration, the likes of which Japan has had to deal with for some time. And the interest beyond manga and animation, like music, media, and of course fashion from Japan, would also increase in popularity. Until this day, Japan remains an integral part of the ecosystem of modern pop culture and is one of the most visited countries in the world. And while Toriyama-san is certainly not responsible for all of that, he is absolutely a very big part of the equation. And while I personally have left the Dragon Ball fandom, I'm reminded of my childhood memories every time I see the characters that influenced and inspired me. And not just from Dragon Ball, but Dragon Quest, and of course my favorite, Chrono Trigger. And that's Toriyama-san all day. To many of us, he's not only a legend, but a sort of distant friend, humble, a teacher, a talented family member, or simply constantly present. But through it all, for the fans of Toriyama-san, both new and old, he was just like us, constantly at odds with his own abilities, but recognizing how important the work was. He said once, "I want to be born once again as myself, but more talented." Well, Toriyama-san, any more talent, and you probably would have saved the world. So rest in power, legend. You will be missed.
Rivers run dry, dust breaths in the air. 2 dark days, do you have a tear to spare? make a promise, the world awaits. It's heavy just breathing through this debate. Come on, start a riot. When they love you too much, know it's fake, fake, or even hate. Don't be scared if the weight paralyzes you, stayed at the gate. No, it's a lot to take in, it's designed to know when, don't wait. Don't be scared when the weight paralyzes you, stayed at the gate.
I hope you all enjoyed this episode in tribute to Akira Toriyama, and I just want to say that in the spirit of Toriyama-san, I personally am reminded about doing things that bring joy to people. It's weird, but somehow Toriyama-san's passing stopped and made me think about how important it is to see the joy in making people happy, to engage with something that they like. So in the spirit of Toriyama-san, I want to do better by you. So why not give a comment on your most memorable contribution from the world-renowned artist and creator, that being Toriyama Akira. And if you want to take this journey into Japanese fashion culture and of course business with us, give a like, sub, turn on notifications, or like how we always say, keep it locked right here for all of your info in international fashion culture and business from Tokyo. It's your boy, and keep it casual. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. And I'll see you guys in a minute.